October 17, 1943. A forest clearing in German-occupied Belarus, 20 miles south of Minsk. The air smells of wet pine needles and approaching winter. A young woman stands before 7 men, her hands bound with rope, her face bruised from 2 days of interrogation. She is 23 years old. Her name is Katerina Volkov. And in less than an hour, she will be dead, unless a single partisan fighter makes an impossible choice. The men watching her are not German soldiers. They are Soviet partisans, resistance fighters operating behind enemy lines, sabotaging railways, ambushing convoys, gathering intelligence. They fight in the shadows, where survival depends on absolute secrecy, where one betrayal can doom dozens of men. And Katerina Volkov has betrayed them. Or so they believe. The commander of this partisan unit is Dmitri Sokolov, a former Red Army lieutenant who escaped a prisoner of war camp in 1941. He's 31 years old, though the war has aged him beyond his years. His face bears the scars of hand-to-hand combat, his eyes the weariness of 2 years living in forests, never sleeping in the same place twice, watching friends die from German bullets and partisan justice alike. Sokolov has executed collaborators before. It's a grim necessity of partisan warfare. But today is different. Today, the partisan who must carry out the sentence is not a stranger to the accused. Today, the executioner is Katerina's younger brother, Viktor. Viktor Volkov is 19 years old. He joined the partisans 8 months ago after German forces burned his village and killed his father. He fights with the quiet intensity of someone who has lost everything except the need for purpose. His sister Katerina had stayed behind in Minsk, working as a nurse in a civilian hospital. He hadn't seen her in nearly a year. He didn't even know she was alive until 3 days ago, when a partisan scouting party found her running through the forest, claiming to have escaped from the Gestapo. At first, Viktor's reunion with his sister felt like a miracle. But the joy lasted less than 6 hours. That night, while Katerina slept in the partisan camp, another fighter noticed something that made his blood freeze. Fresh needle marks on her arms. Not from medical work. From repeated injections. The kind of marks left by German interrogators who used truth serums, who kept prisoners conscious through days of torture, who broke people psychologically before breaking them physically. The discovery triggered a cascade of suspicion. Other partisans began noticing inconsistencies in Katerina's story. She claimed to have escaped during a bombing raid, but there had been no Allied airstrikes near Minsk for 3 weeks. She said she'd been held in a Gestapo facility on Lenin Street, but intelligence reports indicated that building had been converted to Wehrmacht administrative offices months ago. Most damning, she couldn't explain how she'd survived 10 days of Gestapo custody without visible signs of systematic torture. The Germans didn't treat suspected partisan sympathizers with gentleness. They broke them, or they killed them. They didn't let them escape. By the second day, the partisan leadership had reached a consensus. Katerina Volkov was a German plant. The Gestapo had captured her, broken her, turned her, and sent her into the forest to infiltrate partisan networks. The fresh needle marks weren't from torture. They were from the drugs the Germans used to control turned agents, keeping them dependent, compliant. She was a weapon, human in form but serving German interests, whether she fully understood it or not. Under normal partisan justice, the verdict would be straightforward. A suspected collaborator would be executed. The risk of allowing a German agent to remain alive, potentially compromising partisan operations, was too great. Lives depended on security. Mercy was a luxury no resistance movement could afford. But this situation wasn't normal. The woman standing before them was Viktor Volkov's sister. And partisan tradition demanded a specific kind of justice. When a fighter's family member was found guilty of collaboration, it fell to that fighter to carry out the sentence. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was the brutal logic of underground warfare. If Viktor couldn't kill his own sister, how could the unit trust him to kill Germans? If family loyalty superseded partisan discipline, the entire structure of resistance collapsed. Commander Sokolov understands the psychological calculus at work. He's seen this scenario before, though never involving siblings this close in age. The tradition serves multiple purposes. It tests loyalty. It prevents personal vendettas. It ensures that every partisan accepts the consequences of their decisions, that no one can hide behind commanders or shift blame to others. You live with your choices. You kill with your own hands. That's the price of resistance. But Sokolov also understands something else. Viktor Volkov is one of his most reliable fighters. The boy doesn't drink, doesn't complain, doesn't shirk dangerous assignments. He follows orders without question and kills Germans with methodical efficiency. Losing him would weaken the unit. And forcing him to execute his sister might break something fundamental in the boy's psyche, might transform him from a functional soldier into a liability. The other partisans stand in a loose semicircle around the clearing, watching in silence. They know what's at stake. Some of them believe Katerina is guilty. Others aren't certain. But all of them understand that Viktor's decision will set a precedent. Weakness here, mercy here, could cascade through the unit like rock through timber. Today's compassion might become next week's security breach, next month's ambush that kills a dozen fighters. Viktor stands apart from the group, 10 feet from his sister, close enough to see the fear in her eyes but too far to touch her. His rifle hangs loose in his hands, the safety still engaged. He hasn't spoken since Sokolov explained what was required of him. He just stares at Katerina, searching her face for something, some sign of guilt or innocence, some evidence that would make this decision easier. Katerina speaks for the first time in hours. Her voice is hoarse from crying. Viktor, I didn't betray anyone. I swear on our mother's grave. The Germans kept me drugged. I don't even remember most of what they asked me. When the bombing happened, the guard left my cell unlocked. I just ran. I didn't know where else to go except here. Viktor says nothing. His hands tighten on the rifle. Sokolov steps forward, his voice quiet but carrying authority honed by years of command. Viktor Volkov, your sister stands accused of collaboration with German occupiers. The evidence suggests she was turned and sent to infiltrate our unit. Under partisan law, the sentence is death. As her brother and a member of this unit, you will carry out the execution. Do you understand? The question isn't asking for comprehension. It's asking for acceptance. It's the moment where Viktor must choose between family and cause, between the sister he's known his entire life and the principles he's been fighting for these past 8 months. Viktor's face remains expressionless. But his hands are shaking. Not from fear. From something deeper, something that has no name because it exists only in moments like these, where love and duty collide with such force that both are destroyed by the impact. The other partisans watch in silence. They know this silence. It's the silence of men witnessing something irreversible, the moment before an act that cannot be undone, the stillness before the gunshot that will echo through Viktor Volkov's mind for whatever remains of his life. Commander Sokolov said to do it quickly. Clean shot to the back of the head. Don't make her suffer. Professional. Efficient. As merciful as execution can be. But standing here, looking at his sister, Viktor can't remember what mercy means. He can't remember what justice means. All he knows is that the rifle in his hands weighs more than it did 5 minutes ago, heavier with every second that passes, until it feels like he's holding the entire war in his hands. The silence stretches. Seconds become minutes. No one moves. The forest itself seems to hold its breath, birds gone quiet, wind stilled, as if nature itself recognizes the weight of what's unfolding in this clearing. Viktor takes one step forward. Then stops. His finger hovers near the trigger guard but doesn't enter it. His breathing has changed, shallow and rapid, the kind of breathing that precedes panic or violence, the body's attempt to flood itself with oxygen before committing to action it knows is wrong. Katerina watches her brother's face. She's stopped pleading. She seems to understand that words won't help now, that whatever happens next will be decided by forces beyond language, beyond argument. She's searching for something in Viktor's expression, some recognition of their shared childhood, their mother's voice calling them home for dinner, their father teaching Viktor to fish in the creek behind their village. All those memories that define what brother and sister mean, what family means, what us means in a world determined to erase such connections. Commander Sokolov stands with his arms crossed, watching Viktor carefully. He's calculating. Sokolov didn't survive 2 years of partisan warfare by being sentimental, but he survived by understanding human psychology, by knowing when to push and when to let situations resolve themselves. He can see Viktor teetering on the edge of something, but he can't tell which way the boy will fall. Another partisan, an older man named Grigory who fought in the Great War, clears his throat. "Commander, perhaps," Sokolov cuts him off with a raised hand. "No one else will speak. This is Viktor's decision, Viktor's burden, Viktor's transformation from boy into whatever comes after." Viktor takes another step forward. Now he's close enough that Katerina could reach out and touch him if her hands weren't bound. Close enough to smell the hospital antiseptic that still clings to her clothes, remnants of her previous life as a nurse, her previous self as someone who healed rather than betrayed, if betrayal is indeed what happened. "Tell me the truth," Viktor says, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did they break you? Did you tell them anything?" Katerina's eyes fill with tears. Not the theatrical crying of someone performing innocence, but the quiet, hopeless weeping of someone facing death. "I don't know," she says. "I honestly don't know. They kept me awake for days. They asked questions, showed me photographs, threatened to hurt people I cared about. I tried not to answer, tried to stay silent, but sometimes I couldn't remember what I'd said. Sometimes I woke up and couldn't remember if I'd told them things or just dreamed I had. Viktor, I don't know if I betrayed anyone. I don't even know if I'm still myself anymore." This answer, paradoxically, is the most honest thing anyone could say. A liar would insist on innocence. A German plant would have a prepared story. But Katerina is admitting the one thing the Germans fear most from their broken prisoners, that the torture itself creates uncertainty, destroys the self-knowledge that makes confession meaningful. She doesn't know what she said. She doesn't trust her own memory. That psychological destruction is more convincing than any protest of innocence. Viktor sees it too. Something in his face changes. Not softening, exactly, but shifting, like tectonic plates rearranging beneath the surface. He's recognizing that the question itself is wrong. The relevant question isn't whether Katerina betrayed the partisans. The relevant question is whether killing her will prevent future betrayal, or whether her death will simply satisfy a system that values certainty over truth. He turns to Commander Sokolov. "Sir, I need to speak with you. Privately." Sokolov studies Viktor for a long moment, then nods. They walk 20 yards into the forest, out of earshot from the other partisans. Katerina remains in the clearing, guarded by 2 fighters, her fate suspended in the interval between Viktor's question and whatever answer he's about to propose. Under the pine trees, Viktor speaks quickly, urgently, the words tumbling out before courage fails him. "Commander, I'll make you a deal. Let my sister live for 3 days. Keep her under guard, don't let her near any communications equipment. If any Germans show up, if anything indicates she's been compromised, I'll kill her myself without hesitation. But if 3 days pass and nothing happens, then she's either innocent or the Germans have written her off as dead. Either way, she's no threat to us." Sokolov's expression remains neutral, revealing nothing. "And if after 3 days, she remains a risk? If we can't be certain? Then I'll take her away from the unit. Far enough that even if she is compromised, she can't lead them to anyone. And I'll stay with her. I'll leave the partisans. You'll lose 1 fighter but gain certainty that your operations aren't exposed. You'd abandon the cause. Everything you fought for." Viktor meets his commander's eyes. "I'd abandon a cause that requires me to murder my sister without proof. If that's what resistance means, if that's what liberation requires, then I'd rather live with Germans than become one." The words hang between them like smoke. It's not just insubordination. It's a fundamental challenge to the logic that governs partisan operations, the mathematics of sacrifice that calculates human lives against strategic objectives. Viktor is saying there are limits to what can be asked, lines that shouldn't be crossed even in the name of victory. Sokolov is silent for a long time. His face reveals nothing, but something is happening behind his eyes, some internal calculus recalculating based on variables Viktor has introduced. Finally, he speaks. "You understand what you're proposing? If your sister is a German agent and she escapes, or if she manages to signal them during these 3 days, the blood of every partisan killed as a result will be on your hands. You'll carry that guilt for however long you survive." "I'll carry it," Viktor says. "That's my burden to bear. And if, after 3 days, I still conclude she's a threat? If I order you to execute her then?" Viktor hesitates, then answers with brutal honesty. "Then I'll do what I have to do, sir. But at least I'll know I tried to save her." At least I'll know I didn't kill her just because it was easier than being uncertain. Sokolov studies the younger man's face, searching for weakness, for doubt, for any sign that Viktor is being sentimental rather than strategic. But what he sees is something else entirely. He sees a man who has found his limit, the boundary beyond which orders and duty cannot compel action. Sokolov has seen that look before, usually in soldiers about to desert or break. But sometimes, rarely, it's the look of someone who has discovered an internal authority that supersedes external command, who has found a moral clarity that makes them dangerous to their own side because they can no longer be controlled by fear alone. 3 days, Sokolov says finally. She remains under constant guard. Any suspicious behavior, any indication she's trying to communicate with anyone, and the original sentence stands. And Viktor, if this goes wrong, if German forces track her here and we lose people, I will personally execute both of you. Are we clear? Clear, sir. They walk back to the clearing. The other partisans watch with mixed expressions, confusion, frustration, relief. Sokolov addresses the group. The execution is postponed. Katerina Volkov will remain in custody for 3 days under observation. After that period, we'll reassess the situation. Viktor Volkov has accepted personal responsibility for this decision and all its consequences. Some partisans nod acceptance. Others exchange dark glances, clearly disagreeing but unwilling to challenge command authority. Grigory, the old soldier, catches Viktor's eye and gives a subtle nod of approval. He's seen enough war to recognize courage in its rarest form, the courage to defy collective will for the sake of personal conscience. Katerina looks at her brother with an expression that might be gratitude or might be something more complicated, the recognition that he's just traded certainty for doubt, safety for risk, the approval of his comrades for the slim chance that she might be innocent. She doesn't thank him. There are no words adequate for what Viktor has just done. Viktor doesn't look at her. He walks to the edge of the clearing and sits down with his rifle across his knees, staring into the forest. His hands have stopped shaking. His breathing has returned to normal. But something fundamental has changed in him, some transformation that cannot be reversed. He has chosen his sister over his unit, personal loyalty over partisan discipline. And now he must live with that choice, whatever consequences follow. The clearing empties slowly as fighters return to their duties, the tension diffusing but not disappearing, lingering like morning fog in the spaces between men who no longer entirely trust each other. Commander Sokolov remains standing in the center, watching both Viktor and Katerina, calculating probabilities, weighing risks, wondering if he's just made a strategic decision or a fatal mistake. 3 days. 72 hours. Enough time for German forces to track a compromised agent, or enough time for Viktor's faith in his sister to be proven justified. Enough time for truth to reveal itself, or enough time for uncertainty to metastasize into catastrophe. The forest returns to its usual sounds. Birds resume singing. Wind rustles through pine branches. Life continues with the indifferent rhythm that makes human choices seem both monumentally important and cosmically insignificant. In 3 days, someone will die or someone will live. But right now, in this suspended moment, both outcomes remain possible. Viktor Volkov has transformed from obedient soldier into something else. Not a rebel, not a deserter, but a man who has discovered that following orders can be a form of moral cowardice, that true courage sometimes means refusing to act, that the hardest shooting is sometimes the shot not taken. Day 1. Morning light filters through the pine canopy, illuminating the makeshift camp where Katerina sits under guard. 2 partisans watch her constantly, rifles ready, their faces neutral but suspicious. She's been given water and a piece of black bread, but no one speaks to her. She exists in a bubble of isolation even while surrounded by fighters. Viktor hasn't approached his sister since the commander's decision. He's throwing himself into routine tasks with mechanical intensity, checking weapons, cleaning equipment, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The other partisans give him space, uncertain how to treat him. Is he a man who saved his sister, or a man who betrayed his unit? The answer depends on what happens in the next 72 hours. Commander Sokolov observes everything with the attention of someone who knows that small signs often precede large catastrophes. He stations sentries in expanded perimeters, doubling the normal watch rotations. If German forces are tracking Katerina, if she is indeed a compromised agent, they'll move quickly. The Germans don't waste assets. If they sent her to infiltrate, they'll follow up within days, not weeks. By afternoon, nothing has happened. No German patrols. No unusual radio traffic on the frequencies the partisans monitor. No aircraft overhead. The forest remains quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if holding its breath alongside the humans who hide within it. But quiet isn't the same as peaceful. Tension permeates the camp like humidity before a storm. Fighters snap at each other over minor infractions. Arguments break out over ration distribution, watch assignments, trivial disagreements that would normally be brushed aside. Everyone feels it, the pressure of waiting for consequence, for validation or refutation of Viktor's gamble. That evening, Grigory approaches Viktor where he sits alone, sharpening his knife with methodical strokes. The old partisan settles onto a log nearby, close enough for private conversation but far enough to avoid seeming intrusive. "You did a brave thing," Grigory says quietly. Viktor doesn't look up from his work. "Or a stupid thing? Ask me in 2 days which it was." "I fought in 2 wars, Grigory says. "I've seen men make hard choices, and I've seen men make easy choices. The easy choice is always the one that lets you sleep. You chose the hard one. That takes strength most people don't have." Strength or weakness? Viktor's knife continues moving across the whetstone in steady rhythm. "I couldn't do what Sokolov ordered. Maybe that makes me strong. Maybe it just makes me unable to do what's necessary." Grigory is quiet for a moment, watching the younger man's face in the fading light. "During the Great War, I was ordered to execute 3 men from my own company for cowardice. They'd fled during a German assault, left their positions, potentially compromised our entire line. The commissar said they had to die as an example. I was their sergeant, so it fell to me. Did you do it?" "I did. Put a bullet in each of their heads. Followed orders perfectly. And for the next 30 years, I've wondered if it was necessary, if there might have been another way, if maybe they weren't cowards but just broken men who'd reached their limit. I'll die wondering. At least you'll know." Viktor finally looks up. "Know what? Whether you were right or wrong. In 3 days, you'll have an answer. That's more than most soldiers ever get." Day 2. Dawn breaks cold and gray. Frost covers the ground, nature's reminder that winter approaches, that the war will continue through cold that kills as efficiently as bullets. The partisan camp stirs to life with subdued activity. Fighters roll up their sleeping positions, prepare weapons, consume meager rations. Routine continues, but underneath, everyone is counting hours. Katerina has begun to change in subtle ways. The fear in her eyes is being replaced by something else, not confidence exactly, but a kind of resigned awareness. She's stopped crying. She eats when food is offered, drinks when water is provided, but otherwise sits motionless, conserving energy, waiting. She knows her fate is being decided by forces beyond her control, by German movements she can't predict, by partisan suspicions she can't disprove. All she can do is endure. Viktor still maintains distance, but now he watches her from across the camp. He's studying his sister, searching for signs. Is she anxious in a way that suggests she's waiting for rescue? Does she scan the forest in patterns that might indicate she's trying to signal someone? Or is she simply scared, traumatized, existing in the liminal space between life and death? What he sees troubles him. Katerina doesn't act like a German agent waiting for extraction. She acts like a condemned prisoner granted temporary reprieve. She's not expectant. She's resigned. That could mean she's innocent, just a broken woman caught in circumstances beyond her understanding. Or it could mean she's a very good actress, trained to play the role of victim so convincingly that even her brother can't see through it. Commander Sokolov calls Viktor to his command position, a depression in the forest floor covered by branches and canvas. "Sit," he says, gesturing to a log. When Viktor complies, Sokolov continues. "I've been monitoring German radio traffic. Nothing unusual. No increased patrols in our area, no signs they're searching for anything. That could be good news. Or it could mean they're being patient, waiting for us to relax our guard. Sir, if they were tracking her, wouldn't they have moved by now? Normally, yes. But these aren't normal circumstances. If the Germans are smart, and we should always assume they are, they know we'd expect quick action. By waiting, They make us doubt ourselves, make us question whether there's a threat at all. Psychological warfare works both ways. Viktor processes this. So we learn nothing from the silence. We learn that waiting is harder than acting. That uncertainty is a weapon all its own. Sokolov pauses, studying Viktor's face. Tell me honestly. Do you believe your sister is innocent? Viktor takes a long breath before answering. I believe she doesn't know what she told them. I believe the Germans destroyed something in her that made her, herself. Whether that makes her dangerous, I don't know. But I couldn't kill her for something she might have done while her mind wasn't her own. That felt like murder, not justice. And if she is dangerous? If tomorrow I order her execution and order you to carry it out, then I'll do what I said I'd do. Take her far from here and leave the unit. I won't abandon her, sir. I can't. Sokolov nods slowly. I respect that. I don't agree with it, but I respect it. In war, we need men who follow orders without question. But we also need men who remember what we're fighting for, why we resist. You remind me that there's supposed to be a difference between us and them. Sometimes I forget that. By afternoon, the waiting has become physically exhausting, as if time itself has weight, pressing down on everyone in camp. Fighters move through their duties like men walking underwater, every action requiring extra effort. Conversations die mid-sentence. People stare into the forest, seeing threats in every shadow, hearing German voices in every bird call. Then, an hour before sunset, something happens. A partisan scout returns to camp running, breathless, his face pale. He finds Commander Sokolov immediately. Sir, German patrol. 2 miles east. 12 men, moving west. They're not following roads. They're tracking something. The camp explodes into controlled chaos. Fighters grab weapons, take defensive positions, prepare for possible contact. Sokolov's face remains calm, but his eyes are calculating rapidly. How long until they reach our position? At their current pace, maybe 90 minutes. Maybe less. Every partisan in camp is thinking the same thing. The Germans are tracking Katerina. Viktor's faith in his sister has led enemy soldiers directly to them. The execution should have happened yesterday. Now good men might die because mercy was shown where it shouldn't have been. Viktor feels the weight of every gaze that turns toward him. He can read the accusation in his comrades' faces, the anger, the sense of betrayal. They trusted Sokolov's judgment, and Sokolov deferred to Viktor's plea. Now consequence has arrived, and it wears German uniforms. But Katerina's face shows only confusion, not recognition. She's not relieved. She's terrified. Viktor, she calls out, her voice breaking. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I didn't signal anyone. I didn't do anything. Sokolov makes his decision quickly. Break camp immediately. We move north. Fast march. Leave no trace. Andrei, stay behind and observe the German patrol. Report their direction and intentions. He turns to Viktor. Bring your sister. But if she slows us down, if she makes any sound that might alert the Germans, kill her immediately. Clear. Clear. The partisans scatter like leaves in wind, gathering equipment, erasing signs of occupation, transforming from a functioning camp into ghosts within minutes. Years of practice make the evacuation efficient, almost routine. But underneath the professional execution, there's fear. Fear that they're already compromised, that German forces have them surrounded, that Viktor's choice 2 days ago has doomed them all. Viktor cuts the ropes binding his sister's hands. Stay close to me. Don't speak. If I tell you to run, run. If I tell you to drop, drop. Understand? Katerina nods, tears streaming down her face. Viktor, I'm sorry. Whatever I did, whatever I said to them, I'm sorry. Save it. Move. They join the column of fighters melting into the forest, moving north with the practiced silence of men who live by stealth. Behind them, somewhere in the darkening woods, German soldiers follow a trail that may or may not lead to this partisan unit, hunting for prey that may or may not be fleeing directly in front of them. As night falls, the question that began this ordeal remains unanswered. Is Katerina innocent or guilty? Did she betray the partisans, or was she simply a broken woman caught between forces beyond her control? Viktor still doesn't know. Sokolov doesn't know. Nobody knows. And now, the consequence of that uncertainty is 12 German soldiers less than 2 hours behind them, tracking through a forest that keeps secrets but also reveals them to those who know how to look. Viktor marches through the darkness with his rifle in one hand and his sister's elbow in the other, feeling the weight of every life in this column, knowing that if the Germans catch them, if shots are fired and partisans die, their blood will be on his hands as surely as if he'd pulled the trigger himself. Day 3. Dawn finds the partisan unit dug into a defensive position on a forested hillside 5 miles north of their previous camp. They'd marched through the night, pushing the pace until even hardened fighters were stumbling with exhaustion. But they'd covered distance, putting space between themselves and the German patrol, buying time to assess whether they were truly being hunted or if the patrol had been coincidental. Andrei, the scout who'd stayed behind to observe, returns as gray light filters through the trees. His report is brief and puzzling. The German patrol had reached the abandoned partisan camp, searched it thoroughly, then turned east rather than north. They weren't tracking the partisans. They were searching for something else, or someone else, moving in a pattern that suggested they were lost rather than hunting. The tension that had gripped the unit since yesterday evening doesn't release so much as transform into something more complex. Relief that they aren't being hunted. Confusion about why German soldiers were in that sector at all. And underneath, a question that won't be answered by facts alone: did Katerina bring them to that area, or was it coincidence? Commander Sokolov gathers his leadership council, 5 experienced fighters including Grigory, to discuss what happens next. Katerina sits under guard 50 yards away, close enough to see them debating her fate but too far to hear their words. Viktor stands apart from both groups, belonging fully to neither, caught in the space between sister and comrades. The 3 days are up, Sokolov begins. We agreed to wait and see if German forces tracked her here. They came close but didn't find us. The question is whether that constitutes proof of innocence or just good fortune on our part. Grigory speaks first. The Germans weren't following any clear trail. If they'd been tracking her signal or following intelligence, they would have come directly to our position. Their search pattern was random, possibly part of a wider sweep. Another partisan, a man named Pavel, counters. Or they lost the trail when we moved camp. Or their information was general rather than specific. We can't prove she's innocent just because we escaped. We can't prove she's guilty either, Grigory shoots back. In 3 days, nothing definitively incriminating has happened. Following our own standard, that should constitute reasonable doubt. Pavel shakes his head. The standard isn't reasonable doubt. This isn't a civilian court. The standard is, can we risk keeping her alive? And I say we can't. The potential cost is too high. Back and forth they argue, parsing evidence that could be interpreted multiple ways depending on one's assumptions. If you believe Katerina is a German agent, then the patrol's presence near their camp is evidence of tracking. If you believe she's innocent, then the patrol's failure to find them is evidence she wasn't signaling anyone. Both interpretations fit the facts. Neither can be definitively proven. Finally, Sokolov raises his hand for silence. Viktor Volkov. Step forward. Viktor approaches the council, his face showing the exhaustion of 3 days carrying impossible weight. He stands at attention, waiting for judgment. You asked for 3 days to prove your sister's innocence, Sokolov says. Those days have passed. What do you believe now? Viktor is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is steady but carries the heaviness of someone who has learned that certainty is a luxury war rarely provides. Sir, I believe my sister doesn't remember what she told the Germans. I believe they broke something in her that may never heal. I believe she came to us not to infiltrate but because she had nowhere else to go. And I believe we'll never know for certain whether she's dangerous because the kind of certainty we're asking for doesn't exist in this war. That's not an answer, Viktor. No sir, it's not. But it's the truth. If you order me to execute her, I'll refuse and leave the unit. If you choose to spare her, I'll accept personal responsibility for watching her, keeping her away from operations, ensuring she's never in a position to compromise anyone. Either way, I can't kill her. I've tried to find that ability in myself these past 3 days, and it's not there. Sokolov exchanges glances with his council members, reading their faces, weighing their silent inputs. Then he makes his decision. Katerina Volkov will not be executed. But she cannot remain with this unit. Viktor, you will escort your sister to the village of Druzhny, 30 kilometers west. There's a partisan supply contact there who runs a medical clinic. Your sister can work there under supervision, away from military operations. You will remain with her for 2 weeks to ensure she's settled and isn't attempting to contact German forces. After that, you'll return to the unit. Are those terms acceptable? Viktor feels something knot in his chest, a tension he didn't fully recognize until it began to release. Yes, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me. This isn't mercy. It's pragmatism. You're a good fighter, and I don't want to lose you over this. But Viktor, understand something clearly. If your sister turns out to be what we suspected, if she eventually betrays partisans or Soviet citizens, that blood will be on your hands. You'll carry that for the rest of your life. Is saving her worth that risk? Viktor doesn't hesitate. Yes, sir. It is. The council disperses. Fighters return to their positions, the decision made, the crisis passed if not resolved. There are grumbles of dissent, particularly from Pavel and others who believed execution was the only safe choice. But Sokolov's authority holds, and the unit accepts his judgment even when they disagree with it. Viktor walks to where his sister sits. She looks up at his approach, searching his face for verdict. Katya, he says, using her childhood nickname for the first time in 3 days. We're leaving. Together. I'm taking you somewhere safe. Tears fill her eyes again, but this time they're different. Not the hopeless crying of someone awaiting death, but the overwhelmed weeping of someone granted reprieve they didn't expect. Viktor, Don't, he cuts her off gently. Don't apologize. Don't thank me. Just, try to build a life. Try to become yourself again. That's all I ask. They leave the partisan camp that afternoon, walking west through forests that are beginning to show autumn colors, leaves turning gold and red, nature's reminder that change is the only constant. Viktor carries both their supplies, his rifle always ready but no longer feeling quite so heavy. 2 weeks later, Viktor returns to the partisan unit alone. Katerina is settled in Druzhny, working under supervision, beginning the slow process of healing psychological wounds that may never fully close. Commander Sokolov greets Viktor's return with a simple nod, asking no questions about how the separation went, whether Katerina showed any signs of being compromised. Some things don't require debriefing. Some knowledge lives in the spaces between official reports. But the unit has changed in subtle ways. The other partisans treat Viktor differently now. Not with hostility, but with a kind of careful respect, the way you might treat someone who has revealed themselves capable of choosing principle over expedience. Some admire it. Others mistrust it. But all recognize it. Grigory pulls Viktor aside the evening of his return. Your sister. She doing all right? As well as can be expected. She has nightmares. Sometimes she doesn't remember who she is when she wakes up. But she's alive, and she's trying. That's something. It's everything, Grigory says quietly. In this war, that's everything. Months pass. The partisan unit continues its operations, sabotaging railways, ambushing convoys, gathering intelligence. Viktor fights with the same efficiency as before, but something has changed in him. He questions orders more frequently, not in the sense of refusing them, but in the sense of asking why, wanting to understand the reasoning, insisting on knowing that what they're doing serves a purpose beyond simple obedience. Sokolov notices this change and, surprisingly, doesn't discourage it. He seems to appreciate having a fighter who thinks independently, who can be trusted to make difficult decisions when leadership isn't present. The moral clarity Viktor demonstrated by refusing to execute his sister has transformed him from a follower into something more valuable, a man who fights not because he's told to, but because he's chosen a side and accepted its consequences. In spring of 1944, Katerina sends a letter through partisan communication networks. She's working full-time at the medical clinic now, trusted by the villagers, helping treat partisan wounded when they're brought to Druzhny. Her hands, which once bore needle marks from German drugs, now bear the honorable scars of surgical work, healing instead of betraying. She asks about Viktor, hopes he's safe, says she prays for him every night. Victor reads the letter by firelight in a forest camp not so different from the one where he nearly executed his sister 7 months earlier. He folds the paper carefully, tucks it into his jacket pocket close to his heart. He doesn't respond. There's nothing to say that hasn't already been said through the simple act of choosing mercy when certainty seemed to demand violence. In July 1944, Soviet forces liberate Belarus. The partisan war ends as the front lines sweep past, transforming irregular fighters into auxiliaries of a conventional army. Victor survives the transition, is decorated for bravery, offered a position in the regular Red Army. He declines. He's done with following orders, done with systems that require moral certainty in situations where certainty is impossible. He returns to Grozny to find his sister still there, still working at the clinic, still healing. They never discuss what happened in that forest clearing, the execution that didn't happen, the choice that defined both their lives. Some conversations don't need to occur because the truth is written in every day they both continue to exist, breathing the air of a world that tried to force a different outcome. Years later, long after the war, Viktor Volkov will sit with his own children and tell them stories about partisan resistance. But he'll leave out the part about his sister, about the impossible choice, about the 3 days that taught him certainty is often the enemy of justice. Some lessons are too personal to share, too complex to reduce to stories. They exist only in the space between what happened and what might have happened, in the gap between orders followed and orders refused. Commander Sokolov survives the war and later writes a memoir of his partisan experiences. He dedicates 3 pages to Viktor Volkov's decision, calling it the most difficult leadership challenge he faced during the entire conflict. I learned something in that forest clearing, Sokolov writes. I learned that the men who question orders are sometimes more valuable than the men who follow them blindly. I learned that moral courage isn't always about what you do, but sometimes about what you refuse to do. And I learned that saving one life, even when tactical logic demands execution, can be its own form of victory. In 1958, Katerina Volkov is interviewed by a Soviet historian documenting partisan resistance. The historian asks about her time in German custody, what she remembers, what she might have revealed. Katerina's answer is simple: I don't know what I told them. The truth is I'll never know. But my brother knew something more important. He knew that not knowing shouldn't be a death sentence. He knew that doubt shouldn't be resolved with bullets. Whatever I said or didn't say to the Germans, Viktor saved my soul by refusing to kill me for crimes I might have committed while I wasn't myself. The historian asks if she feels guilty for what happened, for the risk she posed to the partisan unit. Katerina considers the question carefully before responding. Every day I feel guilty. Every day I wonder if I betrayed people, if I'm responsible for deaths I don't remember causing. But I also know that guilt based on uncertainty is a particular kind of hell, and my brother's refusal to execute me taught me something crucial. He taught me that being human means accepting we'll never have all the answers, that we have to make choices anyway, and that sometimes mercy matters more than certainty. The moral trap that defined Viktor and Katerina's story wasn't the choice between executing a guilty person or sparing an innocent one. It was the choice of what to do when you can't know which is which, when evidence points both ways, when waiting for certainty means never acting at all. Viktor chose mercy in the face of uncertainty. That choice rippled outward through the partisan unit, through post-war lives, through generations who would learn the story and struggle with its implications. Was it the right choice? 75 years later, historians still debate that question. Some argue Viktor should have followed orders, that partisan security required harsh measures. Others argue his refusal to kill without proof represented the highest form of moral courage. Both positions find evidence in the same facts, just as both sides of the original debate interpreted the German patrol's proximity as proving their contradictory theories. The truth, perhaps, is that there was no right answer, only a human one. Viktor Volkov chose his sister over certainty, chose doubt over false confidence, chose to live with risk rather than kill to eliminate it. That choice didn't solve the moral trap. It acknowledged the trap exists, that some dilemmas can't be resolved cleanly, that being human means carrying uncertainty rather than using violence to banish it. In the forest clearing where Viktor was ordered to execute his sister, where he stood with a rifle in shaking hands and made a choice that defied both logic and tradition, pine trees continue growing. No monument marks the spot. No plaque explains what happened there. But in the space between those trees, in the silent testimony of choices made and consequences accepted, there exists a truth about war that doesn't fit in official histories. Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is refuse to shoot. Sometimes the hardest battle is the one fought inside yourself against what others insist is necessary. And sometimes, in the midst of total war where everything is calculated according to tactical advantage, the most revolutionary act is choosing mercy when everyone else chooses certainty. Viktor and Katerina Volkov both died long ago, their ashes scattered according to their wishes, their story preserved only in a handful of documents and aging memories. But the question they posed through their ordeal remains alive: what do you do when you can't know? How do you act justly when facts refuse to provide clarity? How do you choose between two innocent lives when you're told only one can survive? There are no easy answers. There never were. There's only the example of one young partisan who looked at his sister, saw doubt where others saw guilt, and chose to carry that doubt forward rather than eliminate it with violence. That choice defined him. That choice defined his sister. And that choice echoes through every moral trap where certainty is demanded but truth remains elusive. The forest keeps its secrets. But this much can be said: Viktor Volkov refused to kill Katerina Volkov. He chose mercy. He accepted the burden of uncertainty. And in doing so, he proved that even in the darkest moments of history's worst war, humanity could still assert itself against the machinery of violence that tried to eliminate it. That is the legacy. That is what remains when facts fade and debates end. One choice. Two innocent lives. And the courage to refuse when refusal seemed impossible.